Welcome to Hometown Heroes. I'm your co-host, Rick Irving, with my co-host, Mary Staffeld. And
Morning.
today we have a great guest, Chris Robishaw.
Robishaw, right.
And Chris is a Green Beret. He went in the Army as a private, and I always think about graduated. He retired as a lieutenant colonel. So had a great career, and now he's doing humanitarian projects around the world. Chris, welcome to Hometown Heroes.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here.
You know, Rick, you know how we always run into people all over the place, you and I, and people are always, we're catching them. And I always meet people through people wanting to book Don. And that's how we came to find Robie, was that he, through Ryan Parrott, who is another one of our great friends, who loves Don, connected Robie and I. And so it's really neat how Rick and I always talk about how these relationships work and how all that networking works. So we're really thrilled because you're going to tell a story most of our folks have probably never heard about. So it's going to be pretty cool today, Rick. I'm excited.
Oh, wow. You've had some really amazing guests. I was going through your archives. I hope I can measure up. I mean, you've had some really amazing men and women on.
Well, from what I've read about you, you're a pretty amazing guy. I mean,
for sure.
So tell us a little bit about you, Chris. Where'd you grow up, and how did you choose the Army?
Yeah, well, geez, I think it all started with the movie First Blood, with John Rambo when I was, I think I was 10, maybe when that came out, or 11. And then there was a really good movie called Red Dawn. I don't know if you remember that one. That's where the Russians and the Cubans invaded America. And I just kind of clung on to the idea of wanting to be a soldier. And it never let go through my teen years. And then, in fact, just a few days after my 17th birthday, just a few days, 1 week or 9 days afterward, my parents co-signed and allowed me to enter in the Army Reserves while I was still a junior in high school. So I couldn't wait to get involved. Yeah. So, boy, and, in a lot of ways, it seems like yesterday, but in other ways, it seems like, 4 lifetimes ago. Yeah.
Rick's muted.
I guess you want me to continue on? I mean,
he's muted. I don't know if he knows he's muted.
When did you retire, Chris? Just a few years ago?
Yeah, 5 years ago, 2020.
Okay. Yeah. So you went in the Army at 17. We have a few of our World War II guys. One in particular, he joined at 15 in the Navy. So across the equator when he's 16. So, wow. But 17 is pretty young.
I know how old he is. He turned 98 last year, and the Navy sent him a letter congratulating him on his 100th birthday.
Oh, cool.
So Jack still laughs about that. He thinks it's pretty funny.
That's a nice testament, though. I'm glad they do that. I'll keep an eye out for mine when I turn 100.
Yeah, for sure.
Whenever you went in the Army, in the reserves, you went in and then you became a medic right after you finished basic?
Yeah, it was a pretty cool program. So the summer between my junior and senior year, I went off to basic training. So I still had to come back for my senior year with just a god-awful haircut. And I'll tell you, it was, that old basic training will really do a lot to a young 17-year-old. I mean, I came back to my hometown and into my loving home. I had a great upbringing and loving parents, and it was just everything was through a different lens. And unfortunately, I think it made things rough. Looking back on it, it's nothing compared to coming home from deployments or combat tours. But for a young 17-year-old to go away and experience and, the basic, everything goes into it. A lot of the veterans are listening. Of course, you guys can relate to it. And then coming back and getting into a structure where I have to be going to classes at a certain time. Like I had the discipline, but I didn't do well. What's the term? Reintegrating. I didn't do well reintegrating. So I became a bit of I didn't make things easy on my parents my senior year, unfortunately, and I regret that. But It's all part of growing up. Yeah, and then I went to San Antonio right after high school graduation and picked up with the medical general medical specialist 91 Alpha at the time. And I know Rick and I were going through the different MOS. Isn't it 68 whiskey now? I think is the MOS.
I don't know. They changed everything.
They do.
But we did do bivouac at Camp Bullis. I don't know if they still did that when you were in
did
there.
As well, 88. I think. Yeah, I went to AIT in 1988. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of good memories.
Indeed, I still have them, which is amazing. I can remember a lot of detail. Maybe because it was so impactful.
Yeah.
I don't remember every detail. Of course, nobody does of all their years. And I was just reflecting with somebody that it seems like the things that I remember are the stories that I recall or that I've told over and over again. And it takes some deep thought to break out of those, I don't know, scores of memories, because there's so many more. And then, it's triggered when you hear an old song or you smell something, it kind of reminds you of combat. These old fumes do that for me. Or when you get in touch with an old friend, then there's a whole chapter that you haven't really thought about in a long time. It's just interesting, I think, how cognitively it triggers those memories that are there, but you can't recall them on your own until it's a trigger. I'm sure it goes through with everybody, but I was just reflecting on that recently.
It does. So you were in the reserves, and then when did you go active duty?
Yeah, see, I tried college in Maine, and I was just wasting my parents' money, and I felt guilty about it. I just was not disciplined enough. And it was right about that time that I was going to postpone my studies. I didn't drop out of college. I postponed my studies. That's what I told my dad. And Operation Just Cause had kicked off the Christmas of 1989. And there wasn't, we didn't have all of the video footage that we have in these current conflicts, right? From all the way back, even, the Horn of Africa, we didn't get much footage on that. It wasn't until, I guess, the recent global war on terror where it's back in your living room. As they used to talk about the Vietnam War, it was in your living room. But anyways, what I did see about that invasion, I was just like, what am I doing here? I was in ROTC, and I was like, I don't really deal well with that, because I'm just this undisciplined private first class, and I just felt guilty, like I said, about wasting my parents' money. So postponed my studies, and I went to the recruiter, and I was like, hey, I really want to be an infantryman. And, the recruiter's like, oh, that's an easy day. You want to go from medic to infantry? We get you back into MEPS in no time. And that was in 1990. And then I got to the 82nd, so I had to reclassify infantry, which was a little humbling, because as a experienced E3 promotable, as I considered myself, I had to go through the latter parts of basic training again. And then right to jump school, and I got to the 82nd, and that's a rites of passage, right? Back when hazing was celebrated. And then, right away, things heated up in Kuwait, and I was only in the unit for about a month. I had my one jump with the unit, just a practice jump, no big deal. And then whammo, we were one of the first units into Saudi Arabia in 1990. So, what might be interesting to some of your viewers, I know I get a kick out of it, and I think it's really the fundamental experience that kind of set the way I approached service, was the platoon I got to, or that I went to my first assignment in the 82nd. They had already just jumped into and fought in Panama. So everybody in the platoon, in the Army, your parachute wings, if you have a combat jump, you get a star for jumping into a combat zone or a combat jump. And I was the only one in the whole platoon who hadn't fought or jumped into Panama. So not only had I not been to combat, which wasn't uncommon prior to Panama, and then not jumping in. So I was to bring up an antiquated term, I was the cherry of the platoon. And, so my name is Robishaw, but they called me Roba Cherry, because every crap, literally burning crap details all through Desert Shield. Anytime, there was any type of assignment that was just crap, They'd be like, Robie, report to the first sergeant, you know, or whatever. And so I think that really helped me out a lot, though. Plus carrying incredibly heavy rucksacks as a anti-tank in weapons squad. But anyway, between being the lowest ranking man, severely low, even lower than like private E2s, I was still lower than as a PFC, right? Because I hadn't had a combat jump. And then just carrying an insane amount of rucksack weight. And then going into combat, again, at the time, it was interesting, but not nearly like the Global War on Terror combat in my experience. So yeah, those are my foundation years. I think it really set the way. Oh, and by the way, I did really well, frankly, as a young infantryman. And I excelled. I scored really early a slot to go to the Ranger course, the U.S. Army Ranger course, which is pretty rare to get a slot at that young of a rank. But I had a couple of good mentors. I went through an amazing Ranger preparation course at Fort Bragg. They call it pre-Ranger course. And a lot of the NCOs who are typically going through that course to get ready for Ranger school, you know, it's kind of old hat to them, patrolling or land navigation and all the other things that they want to prepare you for with the Ranger course. But I was a sponge because I hadn't really captured any of that. So I was like listening intently despite being hungry and tired and cold and all that. And that was, I think, where my learning curve really skyrocketed. And then Ranger course, I made it through it somehow. I think they made it easy on me because I didn't know anything. But I didn't quit, and I could carry heavy stuff. And I think I brought a lot of levity to it because I didn't think I was going to make it anyways. And there was no pressure for me to make it. I was just a E3 promotable, you know, like there was no pressure. It was just something I wanted to do. So I didn't take it too serious in terms of, I didn't let things get me down. I didn't have a wife. I had a girlfriend at the time, but no kids. Like I wasn't missing family. I didn't have anything on my mind. There was no professional pressure like the lieutenants and the senior NCOs have. And so I skated through that, got good peer evals. So I learned a lot about myself through the peer evaluation system, which is something, especially later in special operations, is a big part of, I think that's an important tool as you learn how to better yourself by what your peers are seeing. Yeah, and then I just kind of made my way through the ranks. And one interesting statistic might be, I spent 6 years at one single platoon. And in that 6 years, I served in every position in that platoon, all the way up to platoon sergeant. So when I finally, years later, I went to officer candidate school and I became a lieutenant and I stayed with the infantry. You know, it's kind of easy for me to become a lieutenant in the infantry because I'd already done every position in the infantry platoon. Right. So I think part of my, you know, speech to the platoon when I first got assigned in the 101st was, hey, I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't done. Like I know what to expect. So you're not going to get over on me and you're not going to believe this, but I think I have a lot to offer you as well from my experiences, you know, as having achieved every NCO rank. Well, every NCO position, I was an E6 platoon sergeant. I never made it to E7. And then, yeah, the infantry for a couple of years. And then I feel like I'm doing all the talking, but I guess this is an interview.
But whenever you went to OCS, then after you graduated, you were still in the Rangers, but you just took a different position. And had you done some deployments with the Rangers before you went to OCS?
Yeah, that's a common misconception. So I never served in a Ranger regiment, the regiment. And, you know, the 3 battalions plus the headquarters and the training at Fort Benning. So I was just a Ranger qualified paratrooper. So again, it was just a course for me. It wasn't an assignment. Okay. So despite earning the Ranger tab, which is common for all graduates of the Ranger course, only a fraction of them actually go on to go into the Rangers as a career path. I was one of the majority who just returned back to their combat arms unit. So when I was a lieutenant, I just went from the 82nd to the 101st. But if I may, one of the things I'm most proud about in my peacetime service, I guess I was set up for it. So when I was in E6, I did try out for the Green Berets. It's called the selection course, and I made it. And I made it as an E6, but unfortunately, they selected me to be a medic. And now you're still a Green Beret, you're still an operator, but within that scope, you get assignments on the team: medic or engineer or weapons or medic, engineer. I feel like I'm missing one, but maybe I'm not. But they selected me to be a medic. And frankly, the medic course is the longest and the hardest academically. And I had a self-awareness, at least enough self-awareness to realize I wasn't cut out for that course. I just didn't have the academic capability. I'm just not that bright then, and I'm certainly not now. And I just knew I couldn't pass the course. So I didn't take the selection. I was like, I can't make it through that course. But what I can do is officer candidate school, and I can rock the crap out of officer candidate school. And that's what I did. Not only was it a lot shorter, it was incredibly easy. And, it's 100% pass rate, unless you have an honor violation. So I went that route. And so that kind of, again, that was another massive accomplishment personally, that I started to gain a lot of confidence. Like, you know what? I kind of know what I'm doing here. I made it through all the NCOS, non-commissioned officer education system, all the NCOES schools on my rise to platoon sergeant. And I was doing really good, on evaluations and performance. And in the 82nd, I was a rising star. I earned the Audie Murphy Award club. I won't bore you with that, but so I was getting all these little things along the way that, man, maybe I did make a good call dropping out of college, postponing my studies from college. This was what I was meant to do. And I was doing well. And then, so I went to officer candidate school. Again, that was relatively easy. Went to the infantry course for officers. That was super easy. And then I got to 101st, and I just really enjoyed being in a leadership role again. Now, the next milestone in my life, frankly, as a life experience, let alone the military, was I met an amazing colleague at OCS, another student named Jay Hansen. Now, he was in the Rangers proper, as we were talking about, and he did jump into Panama and fought. Anyway, he introduced himself to me in OCS, and he talked to me about this event. It was a big deal in the peacetime Army at the time, called the Best Ranger Competition. It's been televised a bunch. In fact, this year's kicks off this weekend. Unfortunately, I'm not going this weekend. I've attended several years in the past with my dear friend Jay Hansen. And Jay and I went to the cadre at OCS, and we asked if we could compete in the Best Ranger competition, because we were Ranger qualified, right? And we were just students, and the officer candidate school cadre encouraged it. And out of nowhere, again, Jay was the hero of the team. It's a 2-person team. But he didn't break me, and we took second place with no training, which is absurdly rare. But the beauty of that year was all of the tests were surprise events. They didn't put out what you were going to be tested on as they had in years past. And with Jay's experience as a senior NCO and my experience as a platoon sergeant 82nd, between the two of us, we had a lot of competency on the technical parts of being an infantryman. And we took second. Of course, we were distant second behind the winners. And then the next year, we got literally recruited to go to the 101st. It was funny, as lieutenants with this reputation of having taken second place at Best Ranger, the divisions were reaching down to us, asking us to come to their division. Like, they would change our orders for the assignment so that we could represent them at the next year's Best Ranger. And I think I was on my way to Fort Lewis, or Jay was on his way to New York, Fort Drum, or maybe it was opposite. And then Jay got a call from the commanding general of the 101st one night, right there in his housing right there at Fort Benning with his big family. And he called me. He's like, "Hey, I just got a phone call from the assistant division commander at the 101st, and he really wants us to come to Fort Campbell to represent them next year." I was like, "Let's do it, man. Let's go." And that really that was a huge hallmark for me. I learned so much about myself, about athleticism. Of course, my friendship with Jay, just skyrocketed. And then all the other competitors were these world-class athletes, the best infantrymen throughout the U.S. Army. And I think there was a couple Marine Corps teams and a Special Forces team or two. The year before, there was a SEAL team. But that was a big deal for me. That was up to that point, I realized that I wasn't like at the end of my journey. It's kind of like where that really started. Despite having been selected to Special Forces, and despite having accomplished Ranger School at an incredibly young age, that was like, okay, I'm kind of up there with the best of them now. This is nuts, and it was a big surprise. I've always been very confident, but that was a very material, concrete evidence that, wow, I'm up here with all these amazing other soldier, athlete, warrior, commando, world-class endurance, super endurance dudes. And I was like, wow, I guess I'm onto something. And so I went Special Forces.
Wow.
So then you were actually part of the Special Forces after that?
Yeah, I was lucky. I realized that I went back to the infantry. I went to the infantry as a lieutenant, not to be a lieutenant, not to be an officer. I realized I went to officer candidate school to become a platoon leader. And when my platoon leader time was done, then I went to a specialty platoon. I went to a recon platoon, which was cool. Went to Haiti. That was interesting, fun.
What'd you do in Haiti?
It was a peacekeeping mission. I was an infantry platoon leader of a bunch of snipers and some other scouts. And we just provided overwatch and security for humanitarian missions around Port-au-Prince.
Was it during the earthquake they had? Didn't they have an earthquake?
Before the earthquake.
Okay.
Yeah, but I loved it. I absolutely loved learning the culture there. I fell in love with reggae. I fell in love with Haitian food. And I think that was my second humanitarian deployment. The other one was after Hurricane Andrew. The paratroopers deployed to Miami. And that was cool. You know, again, not everyone spoke English, you know, so it was kind of like diving into another culture. But wearing a humanitarian, even though you're carrying guns and you're in uniform and you got your cute little beret and all that, it was neat because it's still really the same skills, just not the lethal skills. You're still problem solving. You're still leading men. You're still issuing guidance. You're still enforcing standards. You're allowed to be creative. You're trusted with enormous responsibility. So humanitarian, though people think it waters down the warrior ethos when you put war fighters into humanitarian situations, I would argue there's still incredible professional development to be had in that. Oh, and God forbid you're helping people, right? So that's incredibly nice. So then Haiti was as well a humanitarian mission. Though we were prepared to go lethal all the time, it was more of security and quick reaction force for all the humanitarian projects going on around Port-au-Prince at that time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So then at the end of my recon platoon time, that's where I had that epiphany. Like, well, what do I do now? I don't want to be a staff officer. You know, that's disgusting. And I was like, well, that's when I realized I just wanted to be a platoon leader because I'd already done everything else except platoon leader, and I got it and I enjoyed it. And I think I did a pretty darn good job at it. I was like, well, I can go back to being a Green Beret. That's small group leadership. You know, I'm back leading. It's not staff. So I was going through a program the Army has called degree completion. Because if you recall, I never went to college yet. I was the least educated person in my OCS class. Least educated, because I had 60 credit hours. I didn't even have an associate's. But at the time, I had 63 credit hours. You needed 60 at the time. I still got distinguished undergrad, but and so I went back and I was going through this degree completion where the Army's like, you got to get a degree. You're about to be a captain. Like, you're one of the least educated infantry officers or officers in general. You got to grab a degree, and we're only going to give you 18 months. So I breezed through, though I really enjoyed it. I got a degree, a 4-year degree in parks and recreation. Again, not super challenging on the academics and a lot more physical. And you could imagine that fit really well for me. So while I was going to college, dreading going back to the infantry as a staff officer, I went back to the Green Beret recruiter and I was like, hey, check this out. I got selected like 4 or 5 years ago as an E6. I'm fit. I was doing a lot of racing globally. I was a sponsored athlete, so I was still quite active doing adventure racing. And I said, look, I'm ready to go back to selection, but I really don't want to go back to the infantry as a staff officer. And he's like, sir, I got great news. He said, the current policy right now is that selection that you did back in 94, 95, it's still good. You don't have to go to selection again. Where do I sign? He's like, yeah, just pass the physical test, the PT test, and we'll slide you right under. You fall on Special Forces branch.
Man, the stars were lining up, weren't they?
Mary, the stars have lined up for me ever since I went to the recruiter's office as 2 weeks into my 17-year.
Yeah. You just listened to where you were supposed to go and you went where you were supposed to go. It all goes the way it's supposed to.
And a ton of divine intervention.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm the luckiest guy. I tell people that all the time. So yeah, and then the next 20 years was in Special Forces. Sadly, I did have to end up doing staff time. That was inevitable, but I really
don't think any officer gets away without it unless they're just not a good officer.
Yeah, well, I was definitely. Yeah, that's a good point, and there's probably a lot of truth to that. I joke, but I really mean when people say, "Oh, 33 years," and I was like, "Yeah, And they're like, well, what did you retire as? I said, well, I retired as a lieutenant colonel, but I identify as a staff sergeant. And I do. I still, in so many ways, I don't want to dismiss the amazing experiences I had as a Green Beret officer, because it ultimately led to increased positions of responsibility where I really got to serve the men and women under my command to the best that I could. And that wouldn't have been available to me had I not become an officer. So I'm not dismissing that. But being a paratrooper NCO were probably some of the most rewarding parts of my life. That for sure. Now, when I was like a team leader, a team commander in Special Forces, that's the same. Small group leadership, leading men, being trusted with a crap ton of responsibility, being creative, developing a plan, just absorbing input from other people, making a decision, implementing it, leading. I miss it so much. God, I miss it so much.
Yeah. That's people ask me about you because I retired in 2020 as well. I have a long service. So I only have 22 years of service, but I was out for 19 and a half. So I spent 20 years in the restaurant business running multiple restaurants. But the reality is that, you get led where you get led, right? And for people like you that came up the way that you did, there are so many officers that I had worked for, and having worked for one Army lieutenant colonel who, when I was deployed, I don't even like to talk about because he was such a horrible leader.
Oh, no.
He did not know how to lead people. And I told his boss, this man should never be responsible to lead people ever again in his career. Wow. And, I was a couple of years from retirement and they all thought I was crazy and said, what are you going to do? You can't take away my birthday. I'm going to turn 60 pretty soon. You're going to say, see you later. You're out of here. But the best leaders that I ever worked for were those that came up through the enlisted side, because you understood you can walk in those shoes. So God probably led you there because people need people like that to lead them, because it's a great example. It's a great learning curve for them. There's just so much that you learn from a leader that knows all of the things that you came to the table with. None of my people learned a thing from that Army lieutenant colonel. All they learned was they hated him and they didn't want to do the stupid things he was asking us to do because they were just stupid. And you got a bunch of Air Force people being led by an Army lieutenant colonel who has no clue what he's doing to lead people. The man could manage a task like nobody's business. That guy could, you put him in charge of tasks, he was there all day long, but he should not be leading people. You know, so people like you are important, because a lot of young people probably would have exited the Air Force had they had this guy.
Yeah, well, and it's criminal. It's really too bad when there's a bad leader. I've certainly had, well, I guess not certainly. I've been blessed in that I've only had a few bad, I guess, definitely bad. I think I made most of my bosses look good through the years. I've had some amazing mentors, and then there's other two parts to developing your leadership style. It's not only watching the good and the bad above you, but I think I've been surrounded. I think what's really cool about special operations, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but the good thing about special operations is it's another selection. Right. So everybody has to volunteer to be there. So the commonality is it's an additional volunteer. It's additional level of training, but it's also a selection. So you're all, especially psychologically, we all pass the same psychological batteries. So you're already in a group that have a ton in common. They all expect the same type of leadership. This is the generality, of course. And they all know that they've been selected because they're high performers, right? And all these other amazing attributes that the shrinks look for in these selections. I wish the military in general could do that, but you can't, right? You can't screen everybody and then assign people based on their psychological profiles. But special operations, it is a blessing. It is, I think, the strength that when I got to my first special forces team, they were all very similar. And I was very similar to the team commander they had before and the team commander before that, in very general terms. And I think that's what breeds an incredibly high performing and small unit. I think that's the key to special operations elevated performance. It's not an elitism. It's the opportunity to go through an enormous amount of specialized training, and you're going to be working with a ton of like-minded people, and we're all going to generally think the same and problem solve the same and respect decisions and be valued for input at all different echelons. And you can't do that with 1 million service members we have at one time. It's too much to handle. But I think that's what special operations, I think that's the cornerstone of why our country can lean on special operations to do things with minimal guidance. There's all these buzzwords, vague and ambiguous environments, or political ramifications for failure, and all these other little things that LinkedIn likes to put on special operations experience. But
we've got a question from one of our listeners, and this is from Terry Burgess. Terry's a Gold Star dad. His son Brian Burgess was in the 101st Airborne, and
wow.
He got killed in action along with several other people. They did a documentary called The Hornet's Nest. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but Brian was part of that. But he said, Chris, did you find it difficult to remain a friend to the same men you wound up leading? Yeah.
Well, Mr. Burgess, my heart goes out to you and your family for the loss of your son, a true American hero. And I'm sure you have an immense pride, not only in him as a young man, but as a soldier. To answer your question, sir, it's funny. I was at a bar recently, and a friend of mine I bump into from time to time, he was really excited. He's entering into a union as an electrician, and he's excited. He's like 25 years old. And he's telling me how much he's looking forward to being in a leadership role once he comes out of journeyman or whatever. And I was listening to him patiently, and I in talking with him, I came to a realization I kind of knew, but talking to him, this is kind of fresh. And I think this answers your question, sir. I think that the hardest job I ever had, whether it was a task force commander in Afghanistan, a recon platoon leader in Haiti, clandestine operations in Europe, all those things, the hardest job I ever had was that first job as a corporal. First job as a corporal as a team leader, because I didn't have leadership training until that point. Other than Ranger School is a leadership course, because you're hurting, and how do you inspire people? How do you lead people? How do you encourage people when they're cold, wet, hungry, mad, and sleep deprived, right? So that's challenge. But what I would say that was the hardest for me, because not only was I not necessarily prepared, because I made rank so quick, and now I'm in charge of 3 of my peers. How do I assert myself with guys that we were all, you know, it's a few months prior to I left for Ranger School, we were all making fun of the corporals. And now I'm a corporal. And I don't remember how I solved that problem, but I made it to squad leader eventually. So apparently I did. So yeah, it was very, very difficult for me to be a disciplinarian over drinking buddies and combat deploy. You know, we were in Desert Storm together, these guys, and that was incredibly difficult. That was really difficult. I'll tell you, it gets even more later in my career, more difficult. Special Forces is so close knit. In my experience, I'm not speaking on behalf of the regiment or the current serving members, but I was like a walking violation of fraternization. I was the worst officer when it came to distancing yourselves, you know, in the traditional military sense, the commander or the officer from the men. In Special Forces, it's very relaxed in general. I still had Green Berets would call me sir in front of other Green Berets. But in the team room, it's so intimate and it's so close knit, and it's all first name basis. And we deploy together, we party together. I remember Thanksgiving in Germany, we all went to Chamonix, France with our wives and girlfriends, and we had Thanksgiving in a rented cabin in Chamonix because we were all tight. Like there was no real distinction. However, that works well, right? When you're already kind of in the same similar personalities, that they knew that when at the time Captain Robishaw made a decision, or Captain Robishaw is going to direct us in a certain way that not everybody agreed with, because Special Forces is also really good at taking input, and it's a team plan and it's a team solution. And then the officer decides, you know, which way to go with it. And so there was that level of respect, but it was hard. And to this day, you know, I used to say I can work with anybody as long as they're competent. And what I learned later in my career, it's actually quite the opposite. I will take incompetent if you're a nice, fun guy, because I found myself really, really, really bad at disciplining or redirecting people that I had incredible respect for. Maybe I lacked personal courage, and I'll reflect on this for quite some time, because I found out I would much rather have people I get along with that suck at their job than to have people that are really good that I just can't relate to and I don't enjoy being around. That was a huge inversion for me, and it's not in the manuals. It's probably not right. That's probably why I was a better NCO than I was as an officer. But that was a big flip for me in Special Forces, for sure. I would take personality and compatibility over competence. Yeah, it's weird, right?
Yep. And sometimes you can teach. So if you take somebody who doesn't have that competence, if they're willing to learn and you have a good relationship that they're willing to learn from you, then it's a lot easier to get them where you need them to be.
Excellent point.
That's been my experience.
Excellent point. I agree with you completely. Yep. Yep.
So after you got back into Special Forces, then you've been to different places around the world and been deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. Did you go to both of those, or?
Yes, for sure. Both 3 times, 4 times, 3, 4. Well, I was in a leadership position, so it was combat leadership. Unlike the other combat, like in Desert Storm, this was combat. This was firefights. This was streets of Baghdad, and this was special operations missions in Afghanistan. So yeah, this was much more visceral, and with it, I was talking to another person recently that there's a certain thing about combat for me. This is for me, that I miss it. I miss it incredibly, and I am dealing with some problems trying to recapture the richness of life that I felt in combat. So I didn't come up with it. I'm sure other people have said it, but in my mind, I never felt so alive as I was when I was closest to dying. And you're just so alive. Everything is so attuned. I swear, you see better, your fingernails are stronger, your hair's stronger, your teeth are whiter, you've got more cardio, you're able to process incredible amounts of inputs. Things slow down. I was blessed. I don't know how, different combat veterans talk about it. Some people didn't experience it, but things slow down. The harmony of firefights and battles made sense, even when they weren't going good. Like everything just kind of fell into place. And I never really felt overwhelmed, even in the worst times, which sucked, but I was okay. I was all right. I was like, everything's okay. I'm going to adjust this, or I'm going to move that part, or that doesn't look good. Let's change what we're doing. And it just, and I don't know how to capture that now that I've retired.
So you're looking for your purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you were doing all of that, you were so purposeful that you had a mission, and you were focused, and you were driven toward that mission, achieving the mission accomplishment. And then you retire or you exit the military, and then all of a sudden you find yourself like, okay, so, I don't want to sleep till 10 o'clock in the morning, and I don't want to not work out. So how come, how do I deal with all these feelings of not having that purpose of, I have somewhere I have to be. I have something I need to do, people I need to take care of. People ask me about when I retire, do you miss it? And I said, there are things I don't miss, but what I do miss is taking care of my people. And that's the part that I miss. So you have to find that purpose somewhere else, which is part of what Rick and I do and what I do with roll call and everything else. I had to direct and find a new purpose. So it sounds like that's the point you reached was, okay, so now what? What do I do now?
And it sounds like you've found some purposes and have gone from retirement from the military to kind of full tilt into doing humanitarian things in other parts of the world. Yeah.
It definitely kind of fell into place. Personally, I took up bow hunting. I joke, I'm relatively new to hunting animals. All right. And then you kind of let it, hunting bad guys versus animals. So I've really dove into bow hunting, deer and turkey, and I'm really, really bad at it, but I love getting out and just spending time. The woods are my therapy, and trying to ninja through the woods, and it's just really something else. So that was one. That was like on a personal level, in terms of a hobby, I guess, right? I think veterans need a hobby. They need something that gets them up and something kinetic, something to do. And then I'll tell you, I went through another little battle, I guess. As soon as I retired, like on August 31st, 2020, on September 3rd or 2nd, was after the weekend, I got diagnosed with throat cancer. So this is during COVID, and I had to go immediately into chemo and radiation for 7 weeks. And then, of course, that just knocked the crap out of me. I owe it to my wife. I'm looking over here at this room because it was COVID, and she would have to change my feeding bags with a gas mask, and I was just stuck in that room right over there. It was a great room, and I was on drugs. So I kept seeing like Civil War ghosts and having conversations with them and stuff. And I'm in North Ohio. Like, we didn't have any battles. I don't know where these ghosts came from, but that, my wife, she slept right above with a baby monitor on me. She laid on the couch for 3 months so that the old baby monitor, when my son was a baby, she could watch me and wake me up, because I wasn't moving or something. So after that, I was kind of getting my health back. And that's about the time that the big Kabul evacuation, the evacuation from Kabul, Afghanistan, that the media covered incredibly, and that ultimately led to a major tragedy with a suicide bomber I was involved in that. I was asked to contribute to a team, and we, through some very patriotic donors, we chartered a big jumbo jet, and we got to get a few flights in. We had a team on the ground. I was in Bahrain to receive the refugees, and that was really interesting because that was so time sensitive, and it was crisis action planning, and it was just like being a task force commander again, except without a staff. I had amazing teammates. We were a skeleton crew, and there was sleep deprivation, and there was trying creativity, but you're against the clock, and supporting the guys we had on the ground, and then working with the aircraft and the different countries they could or could not land in. And that whole adventure did bring me that purpose. That was like, okay, I didn't think I was going to find this post service with special operations. And it was a special operation. And I was with special operations guys, and we had special operations guys on the ground. And I was like, wow, this humanitarian thing might be my new purpose. And it was while I was kind of recovering from that, because I was still a little sick from the chemo, Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, in special forces, you're regionally assigned, and in anticipation of a regional assignment, every Green Beret is taught a culture and a language for that regional assignment you're going to have. So way back in the qualification, the long course, I was taught Russian culture and Russian language. And that suited me well later, because as I became a special operations task force commander, it was a NATO special operations. So at one time, our task force had like 5 nations flags, or I call it a 7-nation army, right? But that really helped me well. So I was very NATO centric. And so when the Ukraine conflict was ramping up and Russia was positioning forces, I was like, I think he's going to invade. There was a big question: are they invading? Are they just saber rattling? And with my friends and some other veterans, I'm like, I think he's going to invade. I think he's going to do it. And then he did it. And then the network just blew up. Every special Green Beret veteran, that I'm in touch. Everyone's like, are you going? Who are you going with? Hey, can I get a ride? What kind of kit you taking? Hey, I heard, this country won't let you take body armor through customs, and like everyone's rushing to get into the fight. And I was eager as well. And then I came across a really, really key fundamental thing. As a retired officer, you can't take arms under another country, or you jeopardize your pension. The pension, I didn't know this, but it's in some part of one of our founders' documents, that the pension is a retention for what we now call like your intellectual property. And if you're going to get the retention, then you can't export all your experience and knowledge as a retired officer. And if you do, you get your pension pulled, and you're sure going to lose your security clearance, right? 2 things that I did not want to tarnish. So I had to really back off from maybe joining as a borrowed, combat leader. Okay, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. What can I do? Well, that humanitarian thing, right? And then I went over just a few weeks after it. I joined an organization, and we set up camp in Poland. And then our mission there was we were getting super skilled volunteers into places like mostly doctors, surgeons, trauma nurses, also psychologists, structural engineers, morticians, other logisticians, into the humanitarian things that were in Ukraine. We would drive them and hand them off and pick them up at train stations. And we were kind of like a concierge, where people are like, hey, I'm taking 2 weeks vacation from my practice. I really want to help out in the hospital. Can you guys help me out? And we're like, yep, here's your plane ticket. We'll meet you at the airport in Poland. We're going to drive you across, and we're going to drop you, and we'll hook you up with some hospital, in Kyiv or one of the other cities. And so that was really cool. And it was, what I didn't know is how much of my Russian language skills that had been dormant for 20 years. I couldn't believe how much came back. Ukrainian and Russian language are incredibly similar to the layperson. A Ukrainian, of course, would argue that, and a Russian would argue that. But at least it's Cyrillic. So that I was really surprised how much came back to me. There's something to be said for that adult learning model at language school, that somehow you can store it all away. And then at your first checkpoint, you're like, blah, 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 blah. And then I met up with Ryan Hendrickson. The Green Beret network was still very much alive. People checking in on each other. Hey, what are you guys up to? What organization is working? What is in working, meaning what is successful? What is impactful? What are kind of fly-by-night gestures that didn't really have a follow through? Which ones are pissing off the Ukrainian government or the different ministries or the regional commanders because it's martial law and it's militarized? Which ones have good leadership? Which ones are funded? Stuff like that. And in that networking between, I heard about Ryan. I introduced myself to him. And of course, we had friends of friends. And I just loved what he was doing. He was doing a lot of humanitarian work in terms of taking supplies to forward villages and then evacuating elderly. He was with a faith-based organization at the time. And that's how I learned of him. It was before he even really started doing the landmine removal. And then he quickly evolved into landmine removal because he'd be in these villages. I really encourage him to have you on the show because his story is told by him incredibly well. He's so charming. He's such a good storyteller. But anyways, they were like, ooh, hey, this road's mine. And he's like, I know how to clear mines, I'm a former Green Beret, and he's been to additional training, and he did some contracting work in Afghanistan removing mines. He's like, let me clear the route for our minivans or something like that. And he did, and then he found out that there's a real vacancy with humanitarian demining. And he invited me he stood up his nonprofit, and he invited me on as the chief of operations. So the past couple of years, it's just been so fulfilling. Back to that purpose thing, Mary, that you mentioned, coupled with the similarity, I think, of being in the service, and in particular, the complexities of doing humanitarian work in Ukraine, a militarized state with their own set of rules that we absolutely respect. And while at war, right? So I think it's it resembles very much what special operations are not necessarily the people, but the organizations and the schools we've been through really prepare us for this kind of work, working by, with, and through. I know it's cliche, but if you really dissect that really holds a lot of weight. By, with, and through the Ukrainian deminers with their emergency services. All their emergency services, fire, ambulances, and some of the smaller parts of that ministry. It's called DSNS. It's Cyrillic for basically their emergency services. And their humanitarian deminers are the ones we partner with. And through the donations, we're just a crowdsourcing. We apply for grants, and we have a couple of incredible, generous donors. We buy these state-of-the-art metal detectors from an Italian company called CHEA. They're just absolutely the best in the world. And we donate them, but first we train these, they call them sappers. It's a little confusing because military, the engineers that clear minefields, for advancing forces, they're also called sappers. So you have sappers that work back in the repatriated territories in the farm fields, which are basically where most of the minefields are. And then you have sappers in the military sense. So I just want to clarify that that's a term that's used synonymously between the humanitarian side and then also the military engineers. Anyway, so we train the sappers on how to use the CHEA. We advise them. We developed a really close relationship with one of the oblasts, which is one of the territories or one of the states within Ukraine, called Kharkiv. And in Kharkiv, Ryan has built incredible rapport with the Kharkiv Emergency Coordination Center and the Mine Action Center in Kharkiv. And through the graces of that relationship, we're just really proud to have access to the deminers and kitting them up with just the most sophisticated landmines. And then we also get to advise them on the minefields, how to go about it. In mine action, there's a lot of protocols, kind of like OSHA. Imagine OSHA, but for how mine and minefields or spec minefields are approached internationally. So it's this huge OSHA and all their rules. and all for good reason. But we get to assist with surveying, trying to figure out where mines are, and then what to do with them. But all under the auspice of the very, very effective government of Ukraine.
Wow.
So what you're actually doing is preventing a lot of death and a lot of injury later on as the country gets back to normal and people go out to the playgrounds and through the woods and stuff, because y'all have recovered a lot of mines, haven't you?
Yeah, for sure. So, by, with, and through, another buzz term, but again, it's such a powerful word is force multiplying, where with a few people you can really influence or train or advise larger groups. And then they can go on and conduct more training or they can conduct more operations. And then that level of people go on, right? So you're force multiplying, but all started with the core of expertise. And that's really the model that Tip of the Spear falls under. Yeah, and then another great, speaking of a veteran venue like this, we're also very keen. They don't have a VA in Ukraine, though they have a really, really good prosthetics initiatives going on, because like a lot of modern warfare, because of body armor, people are surviving what would otherwise be lethal wounds, but their limbs are just getting decimated. And so they have some, the entire world is benefiting through the research and development of prosthetics as Ukraine, gets their wounded back to an occupational level that they can do, post-service, post-injury stuff. And in that we found a void that isn't being addressed, and that's where do Ukrainian veterans find their new purpose? Where if they're not fit for combat, and of course you could imagine if Texas got invaded, right? Everybody would be super patriotic. Everybody would run to the fight out of preservation of their ethos and their culture and their country, just like Americans would. But if they can't fight, well, they still want to contribute, right? Because it's all or nothing for Ukraine. And so what we found was demining is a really good occupational reset for these combat veterans who've gotten banged up. And now we took it a step further. And Ryan and I and the other veterans at Tip of the Spear landmine removal, we're noticing how much we're getting out of it as former action guys, as we like to say. And now that's our purpose. So we're really enjoying a model that we have where we take American veterans who are looking for a purpose, Ukrainian veterans that need a new purpose, and mashing it up together. And it's a perfect harmonious opportunity for both veterans to get back out there with a purpose for humanitarianism. Like you were mentioning, Rick, those mines aren't going away, right? Every conflict zone still has them. Here's an example. I just did a video the other day to compliment one that Ryan did. Ryan, as we were talking before this interview, was he and the team are probably coming off a minefield right now. Maybe they're on their way to dinner and settling down from the night, doing emails. And but he did a post about a playground that they found had a lot of mines in it. And then I did a post about the mine that they found was this little guy. This isn't a real mine. This is a 3D printed one, to be clear. I should be banging it around. But this mine, it's called a PFM mine, and it's a butterfly mine. And a canister explodes in the air, and hundreds of these little guys come down and spin. And then when they hit the ground, they become sensitized or they're armed. But guess what this looks like? It looks like a toy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so sadly, this mine, even though it's dispersed from the air, they stay long after. And this is the biggest, this mine in particular, the PFM butterfly mine, as they call it, is the primary mine that is just blowing up kids, because kids want to kick it, right? They want to pick it up. They want to hit it, throw things at it, because it looks like a toy. And there's all these laying on the ground. And kids are losing hands, fingers, toes, and feet. because it's not a big charge, right? It's not a fragmentation, it's just a blast. But it'll blow a good part of your foot off or a good part of your hand. So unfortunately, this one in particular is incredibly hazardous for populations, civilian populations.
And the tip of the spear, that organization is a nonprofit organization, and just like early in the pictures we showed all those mine detecting tools, those are all from donations.
Yes.
Of money that you go buy. So it's not I was watching something on YouTube with Ryan, and they were talking about the budget cuts and things, and money that the federal government has put on hold for several months, and one of them was mine detection. But they asked him, is that going to impact your operation? And he said, no, because we're totally funded by our donations. So
yeah. We're very very deliberately apolitical, and Ryan's got a great line, like the mines don't care.
Right.
Not only do they not care what side of the political spectrum you're on in the United States, but they certainly don't care during times of war, nation states or factions or insurgencies, counterinsurgencies. The mines don't care, and they're going to be there. They linger, and so as you could imagine, the threat of mines stays on well after the conflict. So yeah, regardless of the politics, regardless of where future cessation of hostilities from the sides go or don't go, it doesn't change our mission. It doesn't. We're not funded by the government, so the budget cuts or efficiencies or the political changes in funding for that war, it doesn't affect us. And even after the war is done, which I hope is soon, whatever sides in the negotiation, but the war it's a lot easier to get after the mines when you're not within artillery range of the front lines.
And this picture is just an example of some of the mines that y'all have detected and gathered up.
Yeah.
And this just not only impacts around cities and stuff, but the farmers. If their pastures are littered with mines, then it could cause havoc with them too.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that, Rick, because predominantly it's farm fields where we operate, or the wood lines around them. And the reason behind that is, from a military perspective, as a former infantryman, I did lay a minefield, in Saudi Arabia as a young private. Again, each platoon had to give up one guy to go throw mines off the back of a trailer, So of course I was that one guy for platoon. But in terms of mine warfare, mines are a very valuable tool in terrain denial. So if you have in Ukraine, I'm looking out my window here in Ohio, it's very similar to the climate of our Midwest. It's the breadbasket of Europe and all this. So it's just the majority of the landmass is farm fields. And to deny the enemy, you can't put soldiers shoulder to shoulder to shoulder across all these minefields, right? But you have to deny the enemy. It's called counter mobility. You have to deny them, or you have to influence them to either turn, delay, disrupt their advance. So mines are the only way to do it. And I get it. It makes sense. But sadly, if you look at that picture, that we're on 3 growing seasons now. So that's 3 years of a farmer's field that can't be touched because of the mines out there. And these are just huge swaths of land. And then once you find the mines, now you got to meticulously go through and remove them. So those mines are those are anti-tank mines, very, very common throughout the world. Also blast mines, not fragmented. It's to blow off a track or to disable a vehicle, or maybe even blowing up if it's light skinned. But they're they're not armed. The fuse is taken out. You see the empty wells at the top. So there's no fuse on them, so you can stack them. And I was throwing the M21 mines off the back of a trailer behind a Humvee in the Gulf War, and then the engineers would come behind us and then, arm them. But you could, they're quite stable without the fuse of the boosters. So yeah, it's farm fields. It's very much agricultural demining, and that's a huge impact on Ukraine's economy and, the world food supply. I might add, a lot of Africa was, prior to the hostilities, depending on Ukraine for a lot of their grains, and different parts of the war have impeded that. But in large part, the farmers don't have access to these otherwise bountiful farm fields. And it doesn't make demining easier. 3 years of growth, that's not helping.
In order to get funds, Tip of the Spear is going to have a gala pretty soon, correct?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yep. We are super excited about it. May 31st at the Dallas Country Club. We're in receipt of the generosity of a member there who invited us to take advantage of that amazing venue. I got to tour it as a reconnaissance for the gala, and wow, I've been to palaces, I've been to things all over the world, but what a beautiful venue that is. Yeah. So we're blessed with that opportunity. It's a charity gala. It's our first one, and we're super excited about it. We're confident it's going to really help us out financially with continuing to purchase these CHEA mine detectors. It's going to help us fund our trips over there to force multiply, as I talked about before. And we're going to be able to further that veterans meeting together with a new shared purpose on the minefield. So it's only possible through donations. And I think this is going to help us out a lot.
And
it's
for
going to
people
be
For people that want to attend the gala, they can go to your website, linemineremoval.org, and get tickets for the gala, or they can make donations at your website also.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yep, most certainly. And we also have Ryan's really good at social media posts from the field. He's actually really good at social media posts from his headquarters in the Panhandle of Florida. But in particular, his Instagram, the LinkedIn, and the Facebook, he posts from the field. Again, he's talking about these mines just 3 days ago. He was in a minefield at a playground, and he was talking about. So I would encourage people to kind of follow the social media to see a little bit more about where all of the donors, generous donations that we get, what it goes to. In particular, this gala, though, I would love to max out all the seating capacity of that big ballroom they have. We're going to have a couple of interactive things aside some amazing speakers. We're going to have an opportunity to try out one of these CHEA mine detector wands, like a metal detector. We're going to have a little pit set up, and you get to kind of try them out and see what it's like, and kind of put yourself in the feet of, or the boots of a sapper. A little bit more of a playful lens, but kind of see how difficult it is, and then just how hours on hours, the men and women are out there with the mine detector. And we're also going to have a virtual reality experience where you're going to be able to put on these goggles, and the guests will try it out. Now everyone's going to be watching it on a big screen TV as they take a virtual mine detector, and with these amazing synthetic environments that just the technology has for virtual reality, you're going to look around and you're going to be put into a scenario where you're going to be going through a field and see if you find mines. And if you don't, in a virtual world, the consequences are incredibly high. It will be some interactive opportunities there. Plus the speaker lineup is going to be absolutely amazing. And coupled with this amazing venue, we're confident this is really going to help out with our mission.
And that's at landmineremoval.org. And we're going to shift gears to another Ryan. You're just surrounding yourself with Ryans. So let's talk about Ryan, the Birdman Parrot. Navy SEAL, a good friend of roll calls and of myself and Mary.
Great.
And he's got a nonprofit, Bird Eye View Project. And tell us about that.
I would love to. So I met, I don't know if we got time for this story. So I was in Ukraine, and when I was doing that first trip to Ukraine, and I asked a bunch of guys to come with me, and one of them was this really, really talented Green Beret that I hit it off, Bryce Hansen, who was a Dallas native. And Bryce and I worked together in Ukraine, and we had just interdicted a young lady who was about to be entered into human trafficking and sex exploitation. And we got to like intervene, and we got to her before the scumbags did. And we were transporting her back to her foster family in Poland or whatever. And so it's a long drive, and we're in the bus or the minivan. And I said, so what do you got going on this spring, whatever? And he's like, Bryce says, Robie, I met this amazing guy, Birdman, and he's raising funds, and he's doing all this stuff for veterans, and he hired me to help him plan this big event. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I go, what is it? He goes, well, we're going to do 7 continents in 7 days with special operations and endurance athletes, and they're going to run marathons, 7 marathons on 7 days in 7 continents, and we're going to study their brains, and we're going to study their blood, and we're going to build a manual about the stresses of veterans and how do they perform in different climates and different time zones, you know, with a medical team and a research team. And we're going to take these very generous donors who are going to make it all happen. They're going to come with us, and they're going to have experiences on each continent, 7 continents, 7 days, 7 experiences. I was like, oh my gosh, Bryce, you're perfect for it. You know, you're going to rock it. And then I jokingly said, if you need any help, I'm your man. And then a few months after we got back from Ukraine, he said, hey, can you and another Green Beret that was in the task force, he says, can you and Ricky Tamez, can you and Ricky go spend about 5 or 6 weeks traveling the world to set up each one of these venues for the base jumpers, for the marathon route, for security, for media, for something to get the donors on these world lifetime adventures? And I was like, I'm on it. So we did that, and that's how I got in touch with working with Birdman. Ryan, I am so blessed. Again, I mentioned how lucky I am. He was one of those amazing angels that walk amongst us, right? They're out there, they're on earth, and these 2 Ryans are one of them. So working with Birdman, he brought me on formally just a few months ago as his executive director. And we have some events lined up. What we do at Bird's Eye View, and he's got another nonprofit called Sons of the Flag, which
we're very familiar with that.
Very familiar with, yes.
Oh, great. Another amazing effort.
It's changed a lot of people's lives with the work that Sons of the Flag have done with burn survivors. So
amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. So I'm just so excited to be helping Birdman out with this particular one, Bird's Eye View Project. And this is the part where we raise funds and then we distribute it to affiliate nonprofits that focus on veteran and first responder mental health and suicide prevention.
And you have an event coming up in September.
We do.
It's kind of a unique fundraising event.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us about that. That's a Black Ops.
I'd love to. I don't know if you can tell by the expression on my face. I'm so excited about this because we recently did it last fall, and it was a huge hit. It was a one and done, we thought. And we're like, okay, but at the end of it, we're like, this is amazing. And the feedback we had from the participants was amazing. At the end of it, really what it boils down to is we invite people to come out, make a donation, and then you're going to experience 2 days, 2.5 days of commando type training from veteran commandos and other special operations folks in law enforcement and some of the federal agencies, SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, Air Force Special Operations, Marine Special Operations. I think we're getting a 160th pilot on this year. FBI, Secret Service, just all these guys were coming in to volunteer, and we're going to take these amazing donors through this adventure and teach them things like trauma medicine, and then a lot of tactical things, mostly about clearing buildings, live fire with a bunch of different weapons, how to work as a team, how to work as an individual, how to move through a building, how to clear a room, how to clear a stairwell. And you learn all these little tasks. And then at the final evening, all the training's done, you're broken into teams, and you're going to get a mission brief from me as a former task force commander of a scenario, and I run you through the same brief that I would give to the Green Berets, and you're going to get the brief, and then you're going to load a helicopter and you're going to assault some objectives and rescue some hostages, all in North Dallas.
And that's really, really high tech. I'm going to show you just a little clip
It's amazing.
about that so you can better understand what he's.
We begin tonight with experts saying tear gas and pepper spray.
Officials had feared about the collision of the two crises
riot,
in America.
interfering with a peace officer, and more.
Protesters making 100.
Thank you for playing that, Rick. I got so excited watching it. I can't wait for this year's.
Well, that's just some real life adventure that y'all put together.
It really
and
is.
It's not for the faint of heart, but men and women can do this, and it's you go to birdseyeviewproject.org and you can find out more about how to sign up for that. Because if you're want to do some running and gunning, just like the big boys do, this is the place to go. So that's going to be a great adventure.
All fitness levels, if I may add. It's all fitness levels. You don't have to be athletic in the least bit. We kid everybody out. The scenarios because we're working on it now, and I'm not going to let out any secrets about what the mission is going to be like. But we are setting up so much support from local law enforcement, the airspace deconfliction for the helicopters. It's really good. It's really going to be bigger and bolder than last year.
Just a great adventure for people, and certainly a good fundraiser too. So
you guys should come check it out.
I'd like to.
Yeah.
I'd like to come
please.
over there and take some pictures.
Oh, please do. Yeah. Oh, that would be great. Oh, Brian would love to see you guys, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, Chris, our time's just about up, and
Yes.
we've enjoyed having an Army Green Beret
Former.
Special Forces with us. Well, I think once a Green Beret, always a Green Beret, right? Kind of like a Marine.
I don't know. I can't. People say that, the Marines like to hang on to that moniker, and I think that's appropriate, but I'm definitely former. There's no way I could do what those young men and women are doing these days. God bless them. I just don't have any knees left.
But the two websites, birdseyeviewproject.org and then landmineremoval.org, go check those out and find out more about them. They have their websites and then on social media. And we sure hope our paths cross in person. Hopefully you can come to Texas and maybe speak at roll call.
Well, he's definitely going to cross our paths because
that's right.
The one and only Don Graves is going to sing at the event. So
that's good.
And you know, there are so many of our folks out there that love to go to these galas. They like to get dressed up and, you know, get out there and do their thing. So, you know, take a look at the site and see how you can help out and come out there. And it just, you know, we've been to this venue many a times with some flag. So it's really, it is an amazing venue right there in the heart of Dallas. You wouldn't believe you're driving down the street and there's, you know, all this stuff all around you. And then you come up to this location and it's just really fabulous.
Stunning.
Yeah, it is. And you know, it's neat. There's so many things, whether it's this or it's the other event where you get to do all kinds of crazy things for 3 days. We definitely want to be involved and help you guys out however we can. So all of our listeners out there, one of these two things should be speaking to you. Maybe not both, but one of the two. So check them out and come out and help out some great causes.
Yes, please do. You can follow us on the social medias, of course. At Bird's Eye View, we have a few projects ongoing, again, to help raise money for our affiliates. And then, you know, the tip of the spear, not only are we doing the landmine removal for all the, you know, just the senseless victim statistics, trying to tackle that while also, you know, giving veterans some purpose, both the Ukrainians and the Americans. So thank you for letting me bring this to light, guys. I had a blast doing it. I can't wait to call my dad after and be like, oh, I just did this amazing podcast. And it was so nice to meet you guys. And again, I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Well, it was a pleasure meeting you and finding out about you, your career going from private to lieutenant colonel, and then all the amazing work that you're involved in to make the world a better place to live.
I'm blessed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
You will indeed. See you May 31st. Thank you.
Mary, another great American.
Man, I'll tell you, just watching that video made your heart start pounding. You're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it makes your heart start pounding, but it didn't make this old Army guy want to do that.
It made you want to do it? Well, I'm sure that there are some folks that want to do it, but you know, in the landmine removal, you think about, you know, and I know I saw Dwayne's comment on there, and I know that as Dwayne has taken so many people back to the beaches in Normandy, you know, and all the history that he studied all throughout history where these landmines have been used and left, especially children. It just breaks your heart to see what happens to children when they encounter these landmines. So removing them is really, really important. They're not out there for any political reason. They're out there to save lives and limbs. And, you know, you look at the size of that little thing he held up and.
Oh, no, it looks like a toy.
You have any idea to avoid that, right? And it's heartbreaking to think what happens to these kids just trying to go to the playground.
We've got a exciting roll call meeting coming up at NASJRB on is it the 24th?
25th.
25th.
Friday
Okay.
the 25th. Now the RSVPs are closed. That this is not something that we can deviate from because we have to provide those lists to the base. They scrub everybody for security reasons. So, and we will be putting out an email to our folks. So some folks that RSVP'd, I have a couple of them that I don't have an email or a phone number or anything for, and their driver's licenses aren't going through, and I don't have any way to reach them. So what we'll do is we're going to put out a list along with any instructions for the folks coming to the base, such as, you know, which lane to use. You can't bring weapons on base, all the sort of information that we have to put out so that folks know what to do on the 25th. We'll put that list out without sensitive information. We'll send that out to our folks that are on our email. and they'll be able to look and make sure their name's on there. If your name is not on that list, you're not getting on base. So really, really important to make sure that you're on the list. I don't want to see people get upset because they get turned away. But unfortunately, unlike our lunches at the church where we are, we can kind of look the other way occasionally when people show up that did an RSVP. We don't have that option on base. But it will be a great lunch. And Tom Starr, we had him on the show not too long ago. And he will be our speaker. Kelly Krager with the Texas Tech University Vietnam Oral Speech History Project. He's going to be doing the interview. So Kelly, if anybody has been where we have Kelly do that, it's masterful because nobody really knows more about a bazillion stories of Vietnam vets and knows how to bring out those stories so that the audience really gets to hear. So we have about 800 people coming, 200 of them base personnel, 600 of them roll call family members. So it'll be a big lunch. It'll be a great lunch, and we're looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to the other side of it.
Absolutely. That's a big chore. I've got to go from as soon as I finish there, I come by my house, load up, and go to the Gold Star Parents Retreat with Terry and Elizabeth Burgess. So it's going to be a packed 3 days for me. People wonder about Roll Call. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and you can sponsor a veteran. And here's a little link. For just $20 a month, you can fund a veteran's lunch and help with the outreach program. So be sure and check us out at roll-call.org for more information about helping defray the cost of our lunches. Also, there's only a few seats left. This is going to be this Sunday at the new Medal of Honor Museum in Arlington, Texas. And this is the Air Power Foundation. It's a Celebrate the Brave. We'll have, I think, 5 Medal of Honor recipients. We'll have a reception, and then we'll have a tour of the museum. So it's going to be a great afternoon. If you go to airpowerfoundation.org, you can find out more about that. But there's not much time, and there's not many seats left. So if you really want to have an intimate time with some Medal of Honor recipients, this is going to be a great event. And then our friends with the Brotherhood for the Fallen, we've got EK and Jimmy Palazzani. They're going to have the Brotherhood for the Fallen car show. This is going to be right around the corner from Don's house, April the 19th. You can go to Brotherhood of the Fallen's website and find more information about that. And then our good friend, Don Graves, is going to turn 100 years old on May the 3rd. And everybody started calling a few months ago about, they've had some birthday parties, in the past month or two celebrating his 100th birthday, but they started calling and asking. And so, Mary, you got with several organizations, Air Power Foundation, the Fort Worth Air Power Council, and probably some more. This is going to be a great event, at no cost, other than maybe parking or alcoholic drinks. I think there's going to be some finger foods or hors d'oeuvres and some soft drinks. This is going to be right there at the old ballpark, Choctaw Stadium. And they've got a ball game that afternoon, so we had to kind of push this up to noon. That's coming up to May the 3rd. And also, there's going to be a scholarship. If you'd like to donate to the scholarship fund, and it's going to, I think, the Irving ROTC, I think that's who that's going to be for in honor of our good friend Don Graves, who's going to be singing at the gala that we were talking about for the Tip of the Spear. And then May 8th, we're going to have the Vietnam combat veterans share their story. We had a war stories last year, and this was Roll Call, Hometown Heroes, Freedom Mobility, Smiles for Vets, and the Fort Worth Air Power Council. We've gotten together. We're going to have a good venue and it's a cheap date, $20 to get you a meal, and then get some great stories by our veterans. You can find out more about it at roll-call.org. And then here on May the 31st is the first annual gala for the Tip of the Spear, and that's at landmine.removal.org. You can go there and find out more about that. And then save the date. This is in July the 31st. Our friends at the Fort Worth, at the Air Power Foundation, are going to have their second annual Patriot Roundup. This is going to be down at the Cowtown Coliseum in the Stockyards. It's going to be a good evening. A lot of great patriots will be there. So there's just a lot of stuff happening, and I'm glad that we can share in a lot of that stuff, Mary.
Yes, absolutely. And we always say no need for anybody to be sitting home. Get
That's
out,
right.
get active, stay active, because as Don Graves going on 100 always says, when you quit moving, you quit moving. So
whenever I lived in Monterey, California, and stationed at Fort Ord, I worked at the hospital. And, every month or so, there'd be a big article in the news about the beached whales. We had a surgeon. He as soon as people got out of surgery, he wanted to get them up walking. He'd always say, what happens to a beached whale? They die. So,
amen.
And Don, Al Chatwin, some other of our World War II veterans that are 97, 98, 100, 103, 104, we see them out and about all the time. So keep the mass moving.
That's right. Amen, brother.
That's right. Well, thank you for everybody that's been a part of our Hometown Heroes podcast. And we just thank you. Thank Chris for being here and learn more about all the things that are going on in our world. So we will see you next week on Hometown Heroes.